Hi, welcome. My name's James Lutz. I'm with the TCU Library, Mary Couts Burnett Library. I've been there for 18 years, and the last 16 years as the Director of Library Administrative Services. In one of my roles as the Director of Library Administrative Services, I get to deal with building projects and renovations. And as you know, the Mary Couts Burnett Library has just been through a major renovation project. Today I was going to talk about how we got to today from our early beginnings. As you can see on the screen, we have our building foundation for TCU's library in the 1920s. As you can see, there was just prairie land out behind us. One of the things that has been commented on several occasions is the trees that we have on campus now. As you can see, we pretty much brought all those trees to campus, TCU did, and put them in. So our library existed from 1925 to 1959 as the what we now know as the Gearhart Reading Room. That basically formed the library, and we sat out there in the same location. This aerial photo was taken from about the 1940s, and that piece there, so the building from the 1925 to 1959 era, we started out with 30,000 material items or holdings at that time. Very classic looking building. We also have brought back some of those classic pieces as we've added on to the west side of the building at University Drive. Then from the 1959 to 1983, you can see the campus is beginning to grow around the library. As we continue to add more and more print materials, they had to build an L-shaped addition, and they took off the beautiful front side of the building. So in that 1959 to 1983 period, this was our face to University Drive, and we'd gotten ourselves up to about 330,000 items. So we basically grew by 300,000 items in about 20 years. TCU's always enjoyed the ability to continue to expand our collections, which has made for a much richer and deeper academic experience for our students, as well as our faculty conducting research. You'll wonder probably about the front of the building there has big louvers on it, and I guess they were using those as an early form of air conditioning at that time. It was said that you actually had to reach out the window to pull each one of those louvers shut. And of course, as you can imagine, facing the west there, probably every afternoon about 1 or 2 o'clock, some librarian had to go open the window and pull the louvers closed. So from 1983 to just a few years back, 2014, the building had expanded, and again, what we basically saw was from the early building, we doubled its size when we went to the 1950s building, and then the 1920s and 1950s building were once again doubled in size when we added our 1983 building. The 1983 to 2014 period saw tremendous growth. We hit our millionth item during that period of time. The other thing that they did was they removed the west entrance and put an entrance to the library that many of you will probably recall, that was located along our south side of the building. I believe the architects at that time, as the campus began to shift and they were trying to refocus it, they put that entrance in the middle of what would have been the combination of all three buildings. So many of you knew this entrance of the building, if you were a TCU alum going here during that period of time. We heard from many students that it was very unwelcoming to have to make that climb up the steps every day. So as we went forward with our planning process, we were trying to provide a more welcoming building facility. It also got to be pretty hazardous on those steps as the acceptability of wearing flip-flops to class arrived, and when that tile got wet, people would go sliding like they were on ice. So in 2014, we were actually approached. We actually started our library building process in 2008, and essentially what that means is when our incoming freshmen that have arrived on campus this year, we started that in the 6th grade. They were in the 6th grade when we started our planning process. So they, excuse me. So a lot of times we talk about the building of tomorrow or the library of tomorrow. As you can tell, it takes quite a while to get to that far along in the building process. We actually shelved our building process for about 2 years, the design, and then the university kind of came back and said, all right, we're ready to go. We're committed to this idea of an intellectual commons, and the library is going to be one of those anchor points. This new west facade that we have, as you can see, they brought back the columns from the 1920s. There's also a planter bed out in front of the library that mimics what would have been the 1923 reflecting pond that used to exist at that location. So how did we kind of get to where we are today? In the 1980s, we had an immense amount of resources that we used for research and reference tools. And those tools were essentially books at that time, indexes and abstracts. As we had more and more computing capabilities come along, we were able to then add our computers, remove out books slowly. So here's an example of our computers from that time frame all the way up until 2001, as you can see by the date stamp. We had a reference cluster. So as we began to move our books off, the books were beginning to get digitized. And so this group of computers that we had in the library were specifically for using those indexes and abstracts. They weren't for writing your paper. They didn't have any of the Microsoft Office productivity software on there. You literally were using this in place of a card catalog, as well as all those books that I just showed a slide ago. This would have been the 1920s portion of the building, and as you can see in there in the foreground, we have a bunch of journals. Those journals at this point were also things that were just beginning to get digitized, and it's taken quite a long time for that process to happen. As early as 98, 99, we would attend conferences that would talk about the digitization of all our books, the fact that there weren't going to be any print holdings in the future, that it was just all electronic. There would be no reason to have shelving, no reason really to have a library, because we could all carry our library on a personal device. So at that point, we were just beginning that process of moving our materials to an off-site location. So in this picture, we have the TCU Library's very first remote storage location, where we moved a lot of those materials out of the building. We slowly filled it up over about 10 to 11 years. And as we were moving that material out, we were able to then concentrate on library seating. We recognize that students have a variety of ways in which they like to study. They have a variety of needs, the modern student does. So if you will, up until the advent of the personal computer becoming affordable, students would check out, all of us did this, we checked out 30 books at a time. We would take them back to our dorm room. Granted, we never read them cover to cover. Sorry, Mom, Dad, and faculty, that just wasn't happening. What our typical behavior was is we'd take those books back to the room, we would skim through, find the point that we needed for that 10-page paper that we had to have 10 sources for. And in that location was where we had our typewriter or our computer, and then we would actually do our production there. As time progressed, the library would purchase up to about 100 computers, as you can see in part of this picture. And at those 100 workstations, we finally were able to put on productivity software, which meant that you didn't have to take the books out of the library to actually do the work that was required. In addition, in the background, we also saw the way in which students work together on projects change. And this started for us the first opportunity to use something we called the frog pods. We actually went to the Student Government Association and asked them to help us with its naming. We also received some funding from them for this project. And it was basically that the students were needing to work as small groups and teams, somewhat mirroring what we were seeing out in the industry as well, or in the business world. So here's a little tighter shot of what's happening in one of those frog pods. This was actually the day of the opening of the Frog Pods. The chancellor had just been by, he'd cut a ribbon, we'd had a little ceremony, and by the time we had cleared the ribbon cutting, these students moved right in and got right to work. And it was as though that had been there all along. And what these basically allowed our students to do is, as we put more and more of their material onto laptops or through presentations, they had to get together, work together on the presentation, and work out their presentation strategies and rehearse them. So these were very popular for us. They met a need during that time period, and it also allowed the library to begin to learn and watch how our students are using these various tools that we're providing them. One of our biggest challenges, but yet an opportunity, there's a big graph of numbers up on the screen. You definitely don't have to delve into them, but what we basically saw from the fall of 2000 all the way up until the fall of 2013 was we had essentially 86% of the campus would come through the library's doors, and that's including faculty, staff, as well as student ID card holders. We would see 86 unique percentage of the campus coming through. When we do a one-week statistic, which we have to do every year for the educational statistics, we're seeing 75% of the campus roll through our doors during that period of time. They come for a variety of reasons. It's studying, but we also in the early 90s, or late 90s, sorry, early 2000s, put in a cafe inside the library, and that food service was our opportunity to introduce something and say, okay, we see that our students are sticking around for a long period of time in the library. They need a little bit of a break, but they don't want that break of having to leave the building, go across campus, go across town to get some refreshments. But if they can get the refreshments there inside the building and keep working, they tend to be more productive that way. So part of our study to do the new building was going throughout the building, capturing pictures of students in action, not only what furniture they were seated at, but how they were using the furniture. And so it was quite revealing to us in the day and the era in which everything was going to be digital. Everybody would come with a laptop. There was no reason for us to have a computer lab. We also didn't need those pesky books. Here we've got a guy who is in the library, and he's got one of the laptops that the library provides and checks out to students. It's still a service we provide. They still haven't gotten lighter than air, and folks do leave their laptops back in their residence halls and don't bring them, forget them, leave them locked up in the car, etc. So he's checked out one of our laptops. He's also got another one of those classic electronic instruments in his hand. He's got a pencil. So we realized that there's still writing happening on our campus. It's not all typing into a computer. The next picture over shows another gentleman who has both his notebook paper, his calculator, his textbook, and a phone of some sort, smartphone there in his hands. One of the things that we recognized early on in the library is that we've never replaced one technology with another. That's typically not what's happening in a library scenario. We still have today our microfilm collections, our microfiche collections. We still have paper documents. In the world of music, we still have our vinyl LPs. Even older than that would have been our 78s, reel-to-reels, cassette tapes, VHS tapes, beta tapes, CDs, now DVDs of different colors like Blu-ray, and who knows what our next generation of media is. In many cases, as these different media are introduced, they don't necessarily replace the content. While in some cases, yes, you can get your favorite movie on a VHS player, and now is available on a DVD, and then was available on a Blu-ray, or it can even be streamed off of Netflix or one of those Amazon Prime. Not all of the things that we purchase inside the library are done that way. So there's a lot of material that we have to keep on hand and keep stored. This was a great picture that we were able to pick up. A young lady is actually seated in one of our comfortable chairs, and she's just reading a book. An activity that many of us associate with libraries is that it's a place you can go and do some pleasure reading. And so, of course, we have a rich collection of those types of books, as well as our academic books, to give everybody a little bit of a break, give them some downtime. But it also points out the various seats that are available in the library. We have realized that not everybody comes to the library with one body shape, is comfortable sitting in a wood Windsor chair for a long period of time, but that there need to be a variety of seating. So the gentleman on the right, he's working there off a laptop. He's got his smart device on the table. He's also got some textbooks and some paper. And also appears to be plugged in. I'm not sure if he's creating his own quiet zone. We do see that a lot. Libraries are still a place where they want us to shush those making noise, but there's also high energy in libraries today, as well as people work collaboratively together. Speaking of collaboration, we do see folks who want to study by themselves, the solo studiers. And there's a variety of ways in which you can do that. We also have our collaborative studiers. They're working together on, they may all be in the same class, they're working on a project together. So this is just a couple examples of those collaborative studiers or working on projects. Then we have what we call the co-locators, as we've termed them. They're not necessarily working on the same thing, but they're strength in numbers. They can be seated next to each other while they're working. And again, one of the things to take note as I'm talking through this is just how much space each of these individuals is now using. And again, you can see that they're using a variety of technology pieces as well as the traditional print pieces. Here's another form of co-location. We don't often think about it, but the computer lab, the way it was designed and set up. And again, we were shooting for quantity over quality space when we first did this, because we were just trying to get our numbers of how many students we could accommodate into the building. So we've got a couple slides in here that really just show how packed and tight people get pushed in here. Of course, during finals, it really gets jam-packed in our building. These are the I just need a seat anywhere type photos. In the photo on the left, or to my left at this point, would be students actually sitting on the floor. They found little niches in the back of the building to cram into. Unfortunately, if you were one of our alum during this period of time, that might be a picture of you sitting there cramped on the floor trying to get a quiet place, an out-of-the-way place, somewhere where you can focus. The other individual that's in here with her coffee cup and her water bottle actually chose a seat where we return books to. So she cleared out all the books that were supposed to be there and just pulled up a chair and got right to work. And we'd never shooed anybody away from that, but we also recognize that's not really your ideal study environment, a place to focus or concentrate. So these last two pictures in this, again, further illustrate this. The study carrel that you see the person sitting at was never designed for somebody to work at with a computer. You can kind of squeeze it in there, and of course our current laptops, the screens are bigger than this one and probably wouldn't even fit tucked underneath the way she's got it. So we saw people bringing more and more technology to campus, and trying to find places to plug in those computers to get power has been one of the biggest challenges we faced in the last 15, 16 years. And then in the other photo, we've got three people who are actually choosing to sit in a walkway, and you can notice that they're trying to balance their computers on their laps in various ways. And so those are some of the challenges that we were facing as we went into our design process. So the first step in that process of trying to get the library to where we are today was looking at all the materials we had in our building. Over the years, we've been blessed by great funding. We've been able to continue to update our collections, and obviously some of our collections we could go through like a public library and say, okay, these are items that we don't use often, we can pull those out. And then there are other items that nobody ever uses and maybe were a mistake to purchase in the beginning. But that's a rather time-consuming task to make those judgments. So we were quickly filling our shelves. We were having to push seats out to add the materials in there. And it was just kind of a tight situation. So we began a moving project, and unfortunately due to timing, we were confronted with a rather large task. The university came back to us, the administrator said, we've located a spot 2 miles from campus. We want to start construction in about 6 months. We have about 2 months in which you can go ahead and move materials. We were very cautious of the fact that the library had to continue to be an open and available library to the campus while we pulled materials out of the library to begin that construction process at the end of our spring semester. So we contracted with a couple companies, but it was a very labor-intense process as we took our 1.2 million items down to just 400,000 books within the library. Those other 800,000 items all had to be moved. Once we got them to this facility nearby campus, each individual item had to be scanned, its barcode. We had to put it inside of a tray, and we began to track where those items were located in what we call a high-density storage system. So as you can see, the racks, tall racks behind in the photo, those are where we started storing things that were by size. And we basically broke up the collection, so it's not a collection that one can browse. And again, the benefit of technology, computing power and the like coming along, is it allowed us for the first time, as we purchased a lot of digital materials, we began to build a browsing index. And so we now have a virtual browsing system. So as you go into the library and you're looking for an item, it could be in a number of different places. We have both the physical items inside the library, the physical items at this location, our library annex. But you could also see that we had purchased electronic items, whether they were electronic books, whether it was streaming audio or streaming video. So now if you did that subject search on your favorite subject, being, let's say, libraries, you could see that we had a variety of different items there available to you. So we retrieve items from that complex usually within about 24 hours, excepting the weekend. If you know that you can get the request in by, say, 10 a.m., we'll pull the item out of there and usually have it back to campus by 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So it's been pretty, as long as you got your timing down right. So it works out pretty well that way. We also hit upon, I think, a successful formula. We're only bringing back about 10 items per day, which means that the bulk of the collection, or the 400,000 items in the library, are the right items, we think, for our population. We looked at all the items that we currently have and said, okay, we're going to look at the ones that we're just now purchasing. And so we kept all of the things that we had just purchased inside the building. And that could have been a textbook from the 1970s that keeps going missing and we have to keep repurchasing it because it tells us that's an in-demand item at that point. The other thing we looked at was our circulation statistics. And so we realized that, yes, they're not taking 30 items out of the building to go back to the dorm room to work on, except those graduate students and those faculty members who still do that kind of a thing. But we looked at what was left on the tables, because that's the way a lot of folks are working now. They pull the items off the shelves, they'll do the work at the computer lab, they'll leave the items behind. So we look at those statistics of what's being used. And that's what we're keeping on campus. The beauty of having a library annex is that's material that we're going to be able to have around for many successive generations. It's a climate-controlled facility. It has proper fire suppression technology that allow those materials to be in a safe place. And so we've actually extended the length of those materials and how long they'll last us by being out there. So what that's allowed us to do is we've really been able to open up the spaces back at the campus. And this is an example of what the lobby looks like today. This used to be as you came through the front doors of the building, and you walk down that tile floor. In the picture that would be on my left, as I look at a computer screen in front of me, that had the bistro in the back corner of it, if you will. And so that room is now our reference reading room. It's carpeted floors. We've put images of the campus through the various years around the top. They've been screen printed. The various faces of the library are up there, the old student union, what it looked like, as well as those reference items that we've had. We've also introduced power at the seats, so no longer do you have to fish cords across the floor, worry about tripping, worry about your computer being caught on somebody's foot and coming off the work surface. But you actually have power right there at the work surface itself. So it's allowing us to provide quality seating rather than just quantity. We have upped the quantity of seats, which was something we were really desperate to have. This room, whose dedication will be on the shortly, is the Sumner Academic Heritage Room. The Sumner family made a nice donation to the library, and it's allowed us to really go upscale with this room. It's been trimmed out in wood. It has a rather large chandelier. It also has a wall that's depicting the Chancellor's Award for Distinguished Faculty. And it's a room where we can grow that academic heritage. Around the room we have the TCU yearbooks, the Horned Frog annual. We have also the publications by our professors. So it's an opportunity to showcase that academic stuff that we have available. Obviously, athletics has a huge athletic complex where they're able to show that athletic prowess. We felt that the library was where we had to put out the intellectual. Very nice, comfortable leather chairs in there. It's become a real quick favorite of our students. Has big, beautiful windows out to the south. And again, that would have been the top of the steps as you entered the building. Off of there are a couple of group study rooms, an area we're calling the map room. One of the things the architects wanted to do is give each room its own identity. So this rather large 12-person group study room here has been called the Van Gogh room. So again, we're highlighting group study capability. Likewise, these rooms have some soundproofing capability compared to our old frog pods. So if a group of students wants to go in there and work quietly, it also provides them a bit of a quiet environment to go into. The group study rooms that we have available are these reservable rooms, are both in Reese Jones Hall and the library. Reese Jones Hall and the library are connected by a couple of bridges. And the library, if you weren't aware, on Sunday opens up at 11, and we actually don't shut our building again until 8 p.m. Friday. We're in continuous operation on a 24-hour basis, and we actually shut portion of the library down, and we keep Reese Jones and the library open during that period of time. And all of these study rooms, team rooms are available. The students are able to reserve those rooms through the library's website. There's basically a room reservation system. And on the little room scheduler on the glass, there's a light to tell you whether or not the rooms are available or already occupied. This is a view of our new computer lab. And as you can see, there's a lot more space between the computers. No longer do people have to sit on top of one another. There's actually room to bring in a couple books and lay them out in there and not be invading your neighbor's space. These are kind of central to the building on the second floor, and they are right next to the bridges between us and Reese Jones Hall. Here's kind of a view from part of that computer lab looking back out into the library's atrium space. You can see in the background the library's interactive wall. The provost has embarked upon the big questions or the theme years. And so one of the themes that's currently running on the wall is we've been in the discussion about water. And so that's got the interaction capability for discussing and learning more about water. We're also doing energy, power, and population, I believe, for the next 3 years in the process. So that wall is going to continue to adapt with those types of questions. and different questions will be posed there by thought leaders. We'll tie in on the library side with some of our research resources that would get you to answer those questions further. There's some interactives there. You can take a pledge to take a shorter shower, for example. There's some true and false type questions on there. The other thing that begins to distinguish a university library, it's always been one of those things, but is really now playing more importance as we can purchase things electronically, is what we have in our university archives, our special collections, and our rare books collection. So on our third floor, we've put that together. We've got some beautiful new exhibit cases to highlight those things that previously were kind of like Grandma's attic. They went up, they never came back out, you never really saw them unless you were allowed to go exploring. Well, we've been able to now put those things on display. The other thing we've been able to do is provide a really nice quality research seminar room, research room inside of our special collections, as well as have a seminar room or conference room where we can bring materials out for faculty to teach our students about various items that we have in the collection. It's also allowed us to put together a really nice processing space for those special collections exhibits. Just kind of fun with the architecture. There was a little side story. This was underneath the library's atrium steps. At the time of our design process, the architects had just kind of closed it off. It was just going to be a set of steps, and there was nothing underneath it. And of course, it's one of those opportunities to kind of have some fun. The architects let us have a little bit of fun, and I said, you know, what kid doesn't love to have a under the step spot, maybe other than Harry Potter, who was locked in there. But it was just a place that could be a meeting spot in the building. So in this case, we have now what's been nicknamed the Frog Cave or the Purple Wave. It's got some LED lighting. It's just a bench seat underneath there, and it just gives you an opportunity to tell your friends that are coming to meet you at the library, okay, meet me over in this particular location. We've noticed groups meeting in there already, as the library's only been open for about 12 days now. It's getting a lot of use. Here are some of the seating spaces along the first floor. Again, you can see that there's a variety of seats being put in. Electrical's available within a few feet of each one of those spaces. That's been one of our biggest challenges, was to bring in that power to those seats. Of course, the TCU library, like many of the buildings on campus, is completely wireless, so there is no need to plug in your computers to get right onto the internet. The bistro, again, was wildly successful in its years of operation up there, and so we felt like we needed to really bring food service back into the library to keep it there. And so this is an image of their much expanded space. Unlike the library you might have been to recently at TCU as an alum, we do actually allow food to leave the bistro area. They're not required to sit there and eat it. They can take it anywhere in the building except for special collections and the archive space up there, as well as the music library. But otherwise, students are free to use the entire building to have those types of meals. Another space that we have now in the library that's available to our graduate students and our faculty is an area that has been nicknamed the Lizard Lounge. And it's an area where they can host a TED Talk during lunch, if you will. It's got a projection screen. The other thing I should note is in this image there's a erasable wall. That's been another one of those cute interplays between us and the architects. They started calling them writable walls, and we said, well, all walls can be written upon. It's a question of whether or not we can erase off of those walls. So we have dry erase paint is essentially what's there, using a dry erase marker. People can take notes, leave notes, etc. All of our group study rooms have been set up that way as well, and they've been wildly popular. So while there is the high tech, again, we've got that high technology of having a place for you to put your laptop screen up to. You likewise have dry erase walls or low-tack solutions. This is a view of the courtyard between the library and Reese Jones Hall, taken from one of the bridges, and of course you can see another bridge in the background. This space, as they were unboxing the chairs and tables, the vendor who was putting them in really didn't even need to do much more than open the box. Students were flocking to the area. It was a beautiful fall day. The trees had just been installed, and so as you can see in the picture, it's been wildly popular to get in there. We're seeing meals eaten out there. We're seeing folks actually plug into a couple of the exterior outlets that are out there and camping out all day long out there. So it's been a great space, both the interior of the new library as well as our exterior spots. This is just a view of that interactive wall again from the ground level. The thing to note about our steps is they were designed both to get you from the first floor to the second floor, but it was also viewed as kind of an atrium space. And so right after we had opened the building, the very next day that it was open to public, we hosted our first event in that space. And so we had 71 members of the community arrive, and Jeff Gwynn was able to do a new book release there at that location. And so it was, again, well attended. The steps were used just like we wanted to see them used. Since that time, we've already seen student tour groups come through, prospective families. They make the march across from the west to the entrance of the building all the way to the east side. They'll settle in on the steps, and it's been fascinating and fantastic to watch. You can see students at the upper levels. This was, again, the second night that the building was open. We hadn't deployed the computers in the computer lab yet, and yet the building was very well occupied. The energy that we're seeing from the students, it's as though the building was never under renovation, but they always knew it was there. So we're really excited by what we have. We're excited to continue to look towards renovating our west side of the building and to the many more years that come. Thank you.